Gambling addiction can be a devastating problem, not only for the sufferer themselves, but also for loved ones as well who are supporting someone through this kind of difficulty. And while all addictions come from the same source, they're all rooted in people having difficulties regulating their emotions, gambling addiction can have particularly disastrous consequences, because when people get into financial difficulty to do with gambling, it can really cause so many problems. And often someone who suffers from gambling addiction can also be affected by other addictions as well, such as substance misuse, sex addiction, or other types of addictions. So this is something that is very difficult for people to break out of. And often someone who has a gambling addiction problem will have some past trauma that they've experienced. And often actually addressing that past trauma can really help the person learn to regulate their emotions, and then they actually start to get better from their gambling difficulties. But addressing trauma can be very difficult for people, and not everyone is actually ready to take that step. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about what can be helpful for people who actually want to seek help for gambling addiction. So the person who's actually going to do well in treatment and who are actually going to make some steps towards progress in treatment are the people who actually are at that point where they want help. Now, there was an individual that I helped who took many years to get to that point. He really took a long time before actually he had come to terms with the fact that this really was a problem. And that's definitely a good sign if someone is identifying this as a problem and they want to start taking steps towards seeking some sort of help, or they know that it would be good for them to look at, then that's all very positive. And not everyone is there. And there's a big debate over whether abstinence is better or if control is actually a realistic step to take. And the good news is that for some people, control is actually a realistic step to take, and it might even be better than abstinence, because with control, some individuals will see that actually they can control their gambling, they can still participate in it, and they can do it in a responsible way where it doesn't have negative consequences. However, we have no way of telling who are those individuals who can learn to control their gambling and who are those individuals who absolutely need to go down the abstinence route. And that's a real difficulty when we're trying to help someone with gambling addiction. We don't know if we're doing the right thing in helping them learn to control their gambling, and we don't really know, should we be guiding them towards abstinence instead. So really it is down to the individual, and it's down to the individual's preferences, and often people prefer to try and control their gambling than go down the route of abstinence. However, some people might want to go down the abstinence route because they get a feeling that actually controlled gambling might not be for them at all. And I think it really has to be the individual's decision. Of course, actually trying out different things and seeing what happens over time can help you and the individual that you're helping arrive at a decision as to whether controlled gambling or abstinence might be best for that person. Now, there was an individual that I was helping who was in the pre-contemplation stage for a really long time. So they knew that gambling was a problem and they were able to admit that, but actually seeking help or admitting that it was as big a problem as it was something that took them a very long time. And many years went by until this individual became finally ready for help. And then when this individual reached out and sought help, what we actually did was we went down the controlled gambling route. So there was a lot of different things I did with this individual to help them, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this video. So the first thing that we looked at was actually a spreadsheet and treating gambling like a business. So everything had to be monitored. Everything that went into the gambling account, and this was online gambling, so everything that went into the gambling account and everything that was withdrawn had to be on the spreadsheet. So essentially we had a profit loss to see exactly what was going on with the numbers. Now, this might sound very simple and a very obvious thing to do, but actually most people who've got a gambling problem don't ever do spreadsheets. They don't want to monitor what's happening financially for them, because that would be very confronting information for them. They really have to acknowledge the losses And it's a bitter pill to swallow when you actually look at a whole year of your life and realize that you're actually making a huge loss and not earning money. So it was very interesting doing this spreadsheet with this individual. We spent a long time just actually coming up with the spreadsheet and how the spreadsheet would work, and looking at what would be the right things to put on the spreadsheet, what would we monitor. And then we also set rules for gambling as well as goals. So there was the rules for gambling, which was basically how much could this person deposit as a maximum in one day? When would they absolutely have to withdraw? At what winning point would they have to withdraw so that they wouldn't keep on playing and playing? Because statistically, what we know is that the longer someone plays for, the more likely it is that the house is going to win and they'll lose. So actually, that sort of taps in with some of the belief side of things. So if you're trying to help someone, whether you just be a friend or a family member, or if you're a therapist and you're trying to help someone with a gambling problem, you want to really investigate their beliefs about money and their beliefs about winning and losing and the beliefs about playing, and then checking that out with the actual information that we have about gambling and looking at the statistics. So with this individual that I helped, there was so many of his beliefs that we actually looked at. One of the things that he changed right away was the money that he would put in and when he would withdraw the money. Now, when you're supporting someone with gambling, you can only really act as a coach, and you can't push your beliefs onto them. You can only suggest things, and you have to do this in a really collaborative way, because if you tell them all of your rules that you want for them for gambling, that's not going to be in line with their rules. So for example, now amounts that people are gambling can really vary quite widely, and what looks like very shocking numbers to one person is not going to be so shocking to another. So it's really important when it comes down to the numbers to actually remember that it's what those numbers mean to someone if they lose. So for example, one individual, if they lose £500 in one day, that is absolutely horrendous in terms of the consequences, and they're not going to be able to pay some really important bills that they need to pay. Whereas another person can lose £5,000 in a day and it's actually not going to affect them. They're going to be absolutely fine. It's not going to have any really negative consequences on their day-to-day living, and all of their basic needs will still be addressed. So for that reason, you kind of have to understand someone's lifestyle pretty well, and you have to understand what the numbers mean to them. So if I'm working with someone and they say to me that the maximum they're going to deposit each day is going to be £250, then I can't just use my beliefs as to what £250 means to me. I have to really ask a lot of questions to find out what the £250 means to that other person. And if it is disastrous that they lose those £250 and it leads to very negative consequences, then that's when I would suggest that the person would reconsider how much they're depositing. And it's the same with, it's kind of the same with cashing out as well, but it's also about coming up with a strategy that they can maintain. So what is actually realistic? Like over the course of a month, how many times are they going to play? Are they going to play every single day? If they are going to play every single day, then actually let's set the bar much lower than ever before. What would be a reasonable amount for them to win? Because often people get very excited by these big numbers, and of course that has an impact on the brain. You know, the pleasure circuit, the reward circuit in the brain is being triggered, and there is a satisfaction, there's heart palpitations when someone has a big win. So the physiology is something that is problematic because there is a physical response with winning. It's hard for us to all of a sudden convince someone that actually withdrawing, if someone's used to going up to £5,000 and we're trying to say, well, how about you cash out at £500? That's going to be difficult for someone because the physiology is different. However, with practice, people will actually interpret the lower numbers in a different way in the future. So the lower numbers actually can still be rewarding, and the fact that they're actually saving money and keeping money in their bank account can be rewarding. So we have to kind of rewire what's happening for an individual, and we have to really correct this pleasure thing that happens for people when they win money, and we have to start to change the association that actually saving money has to become something that's very pleasurable and rewarding for someone. So this is another area that I look at with people. What if you save this money? What if you keep this money in your bank account? What if you collect money in your bank account and you hold on to money? What would that money mean for you? What kind of things in the future would you be able to afford that have meaning and have long-lasting meaning in your life if you're able to actually save over a long period of time? And if someone doesn't have those kind of thoughts or ideas about money, so money, positive beliefs about money, such as if I save money, I can then buy something nice that will last for a long time and I'll have a nice lifestyle if I'm careful with money. If someone doesn't hold those beliefs, and that's typically not going to be a gambler's belief, they're not going to have sensible beliefs about money, then you want to really look at the person's beliefs. What do they actually believe about money? And someone that I worked with actually believed things like money is the root of all evil. I really hate money in my bank account. I want to get rid of it as soon as it's there. I'm uncomfortable with it. Now, this person knew these beliefs were irrational and quite ridiculous when he was saying them out loud, but at the same time, he felt these beliefs very much to be true. He didn't like money to be in his bank account. He had the urge to try and get rid of it, and that was a very automatic urge. And we looked at the past, and we looked at where those beliefs actually came from, and these were very much in his early life and beliefs that he picked up about money in relation to how his parents viewed money. So we want to try and help someone correct their beliefs about money and start to actually have dreams about things they could afford if they start saving, and looking at actually helping them come up with a positive association with saving, because usually gamblers will be very focused on the quick wins, and it's either just about the feeling that the quick win will give them, in which case it's very compulsive. It's not rational what they're doing, they're not thinking about it, they're just going to gambling as escapism. Or for some people, they visualize that the quick win is going to help them buy something extravagant, and they underestimate the probability of losing when they're in that mode. And of course, there's different modes that people who gamble are in. There's the mode when they're gambling, where their thoughts and beliefs are very unrealistic. And then there's the mode that they're in when they're not gambling, where they're able to speak to you like a completely reasonable individual who's very logical and really does know the consequences of gambling. They know the statistics. They know that the quick win is not going to give them happiness that's long lasting, and they know that the chances of them losing are incredibly high. So this is a combination of behavioural changes, but also belief changes as well. So cognitive changes and behavioural changes. Essentially, it's cognitive behavioural therapy, but you don't need to be a therapist to help someone with this. You can be a friend, you can be a loved one, you can be someone who just is the person that this individual becomes accountable to. You're the person who has access to an online spreadsheet that you've created, where you can actually see every day, what is this person doing? And they have to log, and they have to give you permission. If they're wanting help from you, of course, they should give you permission to freely look at this sheet whenever you want. So you become an accountability buddy. Just like you might have if you're doing exercise or you're trying to achieve other goals in your life, your accountability buddy, which might be a therapist as well, but your accountability buddy is there to help you, to support you. They're never there to criticize you or make you feel bad in any way, and they should never make you feel bad about your beliefs about gambling, but just suggest some alternatives. So with the individual that I worked with, we looked at some visualization in relation to long-lasting financial goals. If he saved money, then his goal was actually that he would be able to buy a house in the future, and in order to be able to buy the house, he had to actually clock out from gambling after a relatively small win, and he had to be very disciplined about that. So he really got into visualizing, he got into the goal, he got excited about the possibility of getting on the property ladder. He saw that it was realistic, but it was only realistic if he kept playing in a certain responsible way for a really long time. And this is difficult. I mean, it took this individual about a year from when we actually started doing the spreadsheet to when he started taking the spreadsheet very seriously and started logging it on a really consistent basis. And we noticed different things from when we started the spreadsheet to actually how the spreadsheet ended up. Now, the spreadsheet was never going to end up how I wanted it to end up, and I was very careful about not pushing my wants onto the spreadsheet because I don't gamble. So what I would do with money is I like to keep it in my bank account. That's where I feel it's safe, and I'm not a risk taker. So I couldn't really tell this individual what my beliefs would be or what I think he should do, because my advice would just be don't gamble at all. So I had to give him the freedom to experiment and just take away learnings from those experiments so then he could tweak and change things and make his own decisions based on that. So what happened in the beginning was I was suggesting very rigid cutoff points where he had to withdraw the money very, very quickly. That wasn't for him. For him, that was too boring. Bearing in mind there's a huge physiological element to the gambling, so I can understand why that just wasn't very stimulating for him. So a year later down the line, how the spreadsheet ended up looking was that he was depositing what I would consider large amounts of money, and I would consider the money that he was depositing still to be quite excessive. However, every single lodging, every single deposit was monitored and logged. So that's very unusual for a gambler to do that. And he had his red days and his green days. His red days were losses and his green days were wins. And another thing was he didn't actually have a rule exactly for when he should withdraw the money, which I considered a little bit risky, and I suggested having a rule for that. But what he was actually doing was he was staying fairly disciplined with where he would withdraw. So he was withdrawing very soon on his gambling days rather than actually playing for a longer period of time. And something really, really astounding happened. On some months, he would actually have a very large amount of wins. I mean, on some months of this sheet, he would have wins every single day, bar 2 days out of that month. Now, that wouldn't be every month, because another month he would have more losses. But what was actually happening over time was when he'd have the losses, he would say, oh, that's just a business expense, that's just a occupational hazard, that's fine, I'm not going to get too emotional about it, I'm not going to chase my losses, I'm not going to try and get my losses back, I'm just going to stop playing for today, I'll leave it there, I'll come back the next day and I will play with my set of rules again. So he was not chasing his losses, essentially, because we'd taken the emotional element out of the losses. So he was running his gambling more like a business. So he was doing his profit loss. And what we actually found was he had many months where he was in profit. And to this day, he has maintained this. He is now in profit for the last year in relation to his gambling. Now, is this strategy perfect? No, it's not perfect, because there could be more rules on the sheet. I would be nervous about someone losing control. I would be nervous about someone having a bad day, and I think this individual is nervous about having a bad day as well, and nervous about when maybe something might be not going so great in his life and he might turn back to gambling for escapism. So it's not safe yet. He's not in the complete clear, but things are drastically different because he has changed a lot of his gambling behaviors. He's changed his beliefs about gambling. He's set realistic goals about money. He's definitely done SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, timely goals in relation to money. So what I've seen with this individual is significant amounts of behavior change, and with that we found a lot of belief change as well. So I'm seeing that this behavior is a lot more sensible, and really for anyone who wants to change their gambling, this would be a very good start. Now, there is no perfect solution for gambling addiction. There's been lots of research on what helps best with gamblers. For some people, it's joining group programs with other gamblers. For other people, it's things like listening to audios where they can go into a visualization of when they get the temptation, they take a deep breath, they visualize themselves walking away, and with rehearsing that visualization over and over. There's some research that says that if the person rehearses this twice a day for 7 days, they're actually prepared to take a deep breath and walk away from a tempting situation where they might have an urge to compulsively gamble. Now, I did suggest these kind of audios, which is created by the therapist for the client to listen to, so they actually practice walking away from the situation through visualization, through listening to this audio, and then they're prepared for it. With this individual, they didn't want to go down that route. It just wasn't that appealing for them. However, that is also an evidence-based treatment, because there has been some research published on that has proven that it can work. Of course, it can only work if someone is actually willing to try, and not every treatment approach is going to be appealing for someone. While there is very good results with group therapy is not for everyone. And while there's also very good results in actually looking at emotional regulation and looking at tackling past trauma, not everyone is able to go there. Some people have really horrific trauma. Some people have experienced really troubling childhood abuse, childhood physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and they just don't want to go into that. They just can't face going into those memories. It's too painful for them. And therefore, some people want to stay more on the practical side of things. And it doesn't matter. It's about the individual. Whatever works for the individual is the right type of therapy for that person. And I think the most important thing is that that individual has support around them, whether it be a supportive therapist who can act as a coach and help with the logging and monitoring, or whether it be a supportive friend, it's absolutely fine. But really what is absolutely key is that that person is ready to do it. That person must be motivated to make the change. Now, they don't have to be 10 out of 10 motivated. They just have to have an interest for change in their life. They have to want some change in their life. And that can fluctuate from time to time. They don't need to be motivated for change every single day. They just have to be interested enough where they're ready to take some steps for change. So I hope you found this information helpful. I know that if you have a loved one, or if you are someone who's suffering from a gambling addiction, that's not easy, but help is out there. If you feel that I might be able to help you in some way, feel free to comment below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel.